Molo Sanbonani, hello, how's it? Shalom, good evening. Welcome to another episode of the Big Daddy Liberty Show. That's right, Wednesday, 7:30 p.m. means that this awesome Zulu mug is on your face, or rather on your screens. And we're going to have that conversation around what is topical right now. Hey, man, what's the hot issue of the day? And tonight, you'll hear me rushing a little bit because one of my guests, who happens to be on the road, will have to leave us at sort of 10 minutes prior to the ending, the usual ending of the show. Remember, the Big Daddy Liberty Show is a 30-minute show. So welcome to it. Buckle up. We'll get straight into it. I must also quickly say at the onset, one of my guests hasn't joined us yet. It would have been interesting to have them on. I'm talking, of course, about the spokesperson for the Nelson Mandela Foundation. But before I get into any of that, what are we talking about tonight? Is perhaps what you're wondering. Well, we're talking about the case currently before the Supreme Court of Appeal in, I think that's in Bloemfontein, if I'm not mistaken, and it involves Afriforum and the fellows over at the Nelson Mandela Foundation. Again, the Nelson Mandela Foundation, the Supreme Court of Appeal has been hearing a bid from Afriforum to overturn what was an Equality Court ruling back in 2019 that declared displaying the old flag, often erroneously called the apartheid flag, erroneously because this flag is older than apartheid. But in any event, I'll use the expression the apartheid flag hashtag because it is trending at the moment on Twitter. But the Equality Court back in 2019 had declared this particular flag to be hate speech. That is, even displaying the flag, presumably in private and in public, was what constituted, according to the court, hate speech. The ruling, as I said, was made in 2019. If you jog your memory back, this is after the case was brought forward by the Nelson Mandela Foundation and, of course, the South African Human Rights Commission. That's alleging at the time that the flag was displayed at a protest against farm murders. Now, both the foundation, that is, and the Human Rights Commission are opposing Afriforum's current appeal, and we're literally duking it out in court today. But hey, you're not going to hear me waffle away about this particular issue. Let me bring what was originally going to be all those parties, but it's effectively, I have Afriforum on the line, in particular, the spokesperson for Afriforum, Ernst van Zyl. Let me bring him on. Apologies, Stevio, he's not on camera as he is on the road. But Ernst, good evening, Bob.
Good evening, Sihle. Yeah, just to assure everyone, I am definitely on the road, but I'm not driving, so don't worry about it. All my attention is on this interview, but we are still on our way back, me and the legal team here from Bloemfontein. You were correct there. And it was an interesting day, but there's a lot to unpack here. Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely, and we'll get into that in a moment. Trust you me, fans of the show are very used to people being on the road and broadcasting. But nonetheless, welcome to it, dude. It's always very nice to have you on the show. Again, I must stress, we did invite the Nelson Mandela Foundation. They did confirm that they would attend. Their spokesperson, Mandla Dakada, indicated a few minutes ago that he was being load shed and was trying to find a colleague to stand in. I did suggest to them that they do exactly as Adams did, but I haven't had back in that regard. So I just had to spell that out for you guys so you don't think, we didn't invite the other side and blah, blah, blah. No. But I did also invite my good friends from the Institute of Race Relations, fellow classical liberals, who with them, we often discuss these issues around, our constitutional rights, our freedoms in particular. And to represent the Institute of Race Relations tonight, I'm talking to Terence Corrigan. There he is on screen. Baba, good evening.
Yes, good to be here.
Brother, good to have you on the show, fellas. Let's get straight into it because we don't have long with Ernst. Ernst, I want to play. You guys are obviously currently before the court. You're appealing that court ruling, as I mentioned in the intro. But in addition to that, especially because we now don't have a representative from the Nelson Mandela Foundation who are opposing your appeal bid, let me play a soundbite of what he said about this particular court case, which they have on their website at the moment. Stand by, fellas, as I play that particular soundbite.
Today, the Nelson Mandela Foundation was in the Supreme Court of Appeals opposing Afriforum's appeal of the 2019 Equality Court decision that declared that gratuitous displays of the African apartheid flag constitutes hate speech. The Nelson Mandela Foundation was joined by the Human Rights Commission, the Department of Justice and Correctional Facilities, as well as the Minister of Justice and Correctional Services in opposing Afriforum's appeal. We are confident that the judgment we expect over the coming months will be in favor of nation building, national healing, and indicative of a society where everybody has a right to dignity, respect, and human rights. We encourage all South Africans to stand behind new efforts of building our nation from where we were to where we want to be, a nation that's better, that cares for its people. Thank you very much.
Well, there you have it. That, of course, is comment by pardon me, sorry, he'll forgive me, Mandla Dakada. I nearly said Michael Dakada, Mandla Dakada, who was, as I mentioned at the beginning, meant to join us on the show. But Adams, I'm going to come to you because I think it does warrant that actual response from you. But in responding, I also just want to let my viewers know that in court today, the Nelson Mandela Foundation was actually joined in opposing your appeal bid by the Human Rights Commission, the Department of Justice and Correctional Facilities, and the Minister of Justice and Correctional Services. They were also in the court. Quite a packed court today, Ernst.
Well, yeah, Sikle, maybe just to give you some important context, seeing as some people are unaware, you are correct. This all started in 2019 with that court case there where the Nelson Mandela Foundation added Afriforum as a respondent, which in simple terms is they pretty much invited us to be part of that case. The ruling there was then to ban the old South African flag, and Afriforum then in 2019 already filed our papers for appeal. But now only in 2022 will we that they let us know that we are going to have our date in court. So it's not like Kali Kriel woke up this week and decided this is a good week to go take this case on appeal. We've been waiting 3 years to appear in court. We don't decide when. In regards to what happened in court today, both sides gave their arguments. Everything was finalized, and now we are just waiting for the result, or for the court to say what the result will be. What date that will happen, we can't confirm, but in the end, we will keep our members and also the public up to date in regards to when that will happen.
Well, Adams, before I come to Terence, let me just put to you some of the arguments that were made in court today. Of course, the Nelson Mandela Foundation, represented by the rather prominent, at least very sort of in the media at the very least, advocate Tembega Toby, and of course you guys were represented by advocate Mark Oppenheimer of the Malema case fame, if I can bring people back to that. Shout out to Mark Oppenheimer, man. But some of the arguments made, as we've seen in the media.
Just to interrupt you there, Sikle, Mark is here in the vehicle with me, so he does appreciate that shout out.
Okay, well, there you go. But as I was saying, some of the arguments that were made by the advocate, for the Nelson Mandela Foundation, which I found very interesting. I want to read here almost a verbatim quote. Effectively, the NMF, that's the Nelson Mandela Foundation, saying that the displaying of this flag is actually a bit of they went after you as an organization, to say, all it really is apartheid, or rather the Afriforum yearning, quote, for the return of apartheid. And he continued in his argument to effectively suggest that the flag itself represented a white domination over black bodies. And again, another little, and I'm glancing past his arguments up because of time, but effectively he goes on to say, and what makes it even worse is that the flag itself represents, as he put it, what has been declared by the United Nations as a crime against humanity, which makes, of course, in his view, the flag not just an affront on the dignity of Africans, quotes, but also to all people of all races who support humanity, as he put it. I'll be very interested, therefore, to hear what your arguments were, because I did put this post up on my social media pages, and I can tell you now, they're abuzz with both sides of this argument and, lots of debates. But what was Afriforum's response? Are you guys yearning for the return of apartheid, as was put by Advocate Ngugai Tobi?
Well, Sikhe, maybe I should just say I've been doing so many interviews over the past 24 hours, many of them reasonable, others where I literally have to defend my own humanity and defend the fact that I'm a human too and that I am able to empathize with other people. But that's besides the point. In regards to your question, Afriforum's case is very simple. This is about something much bigger than the flag. Afriforum, I can spoiler alert, there's no old South African flags that are displayed in the Afriforum offices. They're not being waved anywhere at our events. We discourage anyone from waving them at our events. It's not welcome there. And I personally don't own an old South African flag. I don't feel anything towards the flag. But the underlying principle of freedom of speech is why we're doing this case. And here's the important thing, and this is, unfortunately, one of the things that happened in one of the interviews today was I was on a panel with the Nelson Mandela Foundation CEO, and he said that Afriforum is making this debate very theoretical and that it's very simple. But unfortunately, it is not very simple. The enemies of freedom of speech want to make it simple, but it isn't a simple case of good guys versus bad guys. Well, I think if you're banning you're the banners, then you're closer to the bad guys than the good guys, but we can get into that later. The principle of freedom of speech that Afriforum is fighting for here is a cardinal principle in our constitutional democracy. It is one of the bedrock principles of our constitutional order. It is one of the right to freedom of speech and freedom of expression is the right that enables you to be able to defend all your other rights. That's how important it is. Without the right to freedom of speech, violations of all your other rights, you won't be able to say anything because you wouldn't have the right to freedom of speech. But the difficult thing about freedom of speech is that inherently debates about freedom of speech are going to be controversial. It's almost baked into the pie from the beginning. You can't do anything about it. That's the nature of the issue. Freedom of speech is always going to be about controversial issues, and there's nothing you can do about it. And the thing is, when people say, well, can't you just shoot the old flag is so controversial, can't you just take a less controversial issue and still defend freedom of speech? The thing is, you can't just keep fleeing to the high ground. You can't just say, well, let's not do the most controversial case. Let's flee to a bit less controversial case, because then you lose that most controversial case. You lose that ground, and guess what happens then? Then the second most controversial case that you fled to is now the most controversial case. Now you're going to have to use that same logic and flee again to higher ground as the waters rise. And in the end, the water's going to rise so much there's going to be no high ground left, and that means no more free speech for anyone, because you just kept fleeing to the less controversial case and didn't stand your ground. And that's why Afriforum are standing our ground, even when it isn't popular, even when it is controversial.
It's interesting to hear you say that, Terence. I'm going to bring you in here because, that's the part that people were rather surprised to hear, that actually, if anything, Afriforum in this particular case seems to be the ones who are arguing for the current constitution. That is, if you look at the Bill of Rights, one's freedom of expression and the free speech effectively is constitutionally enshrined. But here's where it gets tricky, Terence. If you listen to the argument that was made by the Nelson Mandela Foundation, effectively the argument is, well, this flag impugns on the dignity of Black South Africans, and because of that, because of what I would likely often hear often made the argument, and I'm not saying this was made in court, but I'll use the expression because it's often used, Black pain is at stake here. Because of that Black pain, well, maybe this flag shouldn't be shown, and that its banning by the equality case is justified. Your thoughts on this, Terence? Is freedom of speech that important for Afriforum, for example, to stand on this issue and say, we may not like the flag, but we'll defend people's right to display it, even if they disagree with it?
Well, look, let me do something which I guarantee has never been done on the Big Daddy Liberty show before, and that's quote Noam Chomsky. He said, Goebbels and Stalin and Hitler were in favor of speech they agreed with. If you're not opposed to free speech that you disagree with profoundly, You're not in favor of free speech. I think the point to bear in mind here is that anything that these debates about freedoms and their limitations and where you draw the line, etc., they all involve principles that are deeply held. So in a way, I can feel, let's say, equal sympathy with some of the arguments being made by the Nelson Mandela Foundation and with Afriforum. I can imagine, and as a moral human being, I can empathize, even though I may not personally have experienced it, the painful memories of apartheid, and that flag certainly does encapsulate them. That being said, the American journalist Henry Louis Mencken once said the problem with fighting for any freedom is that you end up fighting for you end up defending rogues, because rogues is where it starts and it creeps up from there. So I agree entirely with what Ernst said. You start off with you say, well, let's go for something less controversial. Well, is there something less controversial out there? If it's less controversial, it's not going to end up in court, is it? I think also, for me, the big elephant in the room when this case came up is that, if I remember correctly, and perhaps Ernst can correct me or confirm, the Nelson Mandela Foundation kind of needed somebody to take to court, and they couldn't really find anyone. That's because, and I'm old enough to remember 1994 rugby matches where the Oranje Banya blow was everywhere. That burnt itself out over 2 or 3 years. It's very, very rare to see it now. The sort of prompt issue was the Black Friday march. And I think there were sort of like 3 confirmed sightings or something. I mean, that's Sasquatch territory. If you consider how many thousands of people of all races of goodwill attended. You're going to find some gentlemen of ill repute who are going to piggyback horrible sentiments. But the fact is that the Nelson Mandela Foundation, to my knowledge, could not actually find an institution that would actually endorse this. They had to go after an organization that didn't. It says that we need to keep this in perspective. And as far as the whole principle of hate speech goes, I would say an object in and of itself may be offensively perceived or offensively presented, but to make it a hard principle of law that you are prosecuted for simply displaying it is for the state to say this is the only possible way it can be represented. And I think we're in dangerous territory when we do that.
Yeah, sorry, Terence. I was just going to be mindful of the fact that we were going to lose Adams because he had to be, had to dash off to another interview scheduled for now, and I wanted to get that final word in from him. But let me maybe tease it out with you. In the final sort of 5 minutes of the show, and just as I say that, Adams did send me a voice note now. But here's the issue for me, and I want to play devil's advocate here, just for the sake of, we haven't, the other side of this argument didn't pitch up, so I'm going to have to play devil's advocate on their behalf. Not to say that they're devils, please, Nelson Mandela Foundation, don't come after me. Someone might argue, it's all fine and well for you guys to say this. Oh, you classical liberals, you liberals always like talking about free speech, but words hurt. And words can be aggressive. In fact, as we like to put it on this side of the equation, words can be not overtly hurtful, but they can also be microaggressions. This is the sort of argument we're hearing today, Terence. And therefore, because they're microaggressions, we should have hate speech laws which target everything and have blanket bans on everything, as is the case with this particular court finding, that is the 2019 finding, which basically banned any display of the old flag. That's good for nation building, as the Nelson Mandela Foundation put it. How do you respond to that expression? That we should put in. Oh, there he is. Let me just give Adams the chance just to wrap up his thoughts. I know he had to be at another interview, but Adams, sorry, I want to repeat that question and maybe throw it to you if you want to also wrap up. That notion, therefore, of there's 2 things here. One, this flag represents hate speech, and it is an affront against Black people. Number 1. Number 2, if it's hate speech, then a blanket ban is okay. In fact, the genesis of that last case was that this was born out of the flag being displayed at a farmers anti-farm murders protest. So of course a blanket ban is okay, and free speech should have these sort of strict and restrictive limitations on them.
Yeah, Sikhle, sorry about that. I had another call for about another interview. I thought it was SABC already calling me. So if I drop out, that's what happened. So yeah, I'll keep it as short as possible. So when it comes to that question, it's very simple. When it comes to banning symbols because of offense, you need to take into account that offense is the spectrum of offense is almost limitless. And that's in the end what's going to derail this precedent. If this precedent is set, that's going to derail the system, because then everything that's offensive needs to be banned under that certain principle. And that's where double standards are going to come in. I mean, when coming from a farming community, when the president of our country goes on an international platform and says there are no murdering of white farmers in South Africa, I find that deeply offensive. But I'm not calling for it to be banned, because I know that's going to be a betrayal of, firstly, the principle of freedom of speech, but also it's going to set a dangerous precedent.
Ernst, let me jump in here very quickly, because there's a particular criticism I wanted to deal with before I let you go. Someone then says, okay, fine, if Afriforum wants to defend free speech and argue that displaying the flag is free speech, then, for example, and this is the argument I saw on my page, or Julius Malema singing shoot the Boer or kill the Boer is also free speech. Why would you guys oppose that?
Because we oppose the public calling of slaughtering an entire group of people based on their race. It's a very simple, but maybe it's not unfortunately, it doesn't seem to be as simple for everyone to understand. This is when hate speech being hateful speech combined with a call to violence. That's why you can't sing in public, kill the Boer, kill the farmer. We actually have cases of people in court cases admitting under oath that they were inspired by that song to commit heinous murders. So no, it does not fall under freedom of speech, and it's I don't think it's very moral to even try to equate those two. And like I said, it's unfortunate that why it's not okay to say that, while at the same time we're banning symbols because it's offensive. And maybe just to finish off, Afriforum absolutely does not deny that the old South African flag is a deeply offensive symbol for many people, and we definitely empathize with people that find it deeply offensive. But at the same time, like I said, we can't set that precedent of banning things because they are offensive, because then you're doing exactly what the previous government did as well. The apartheid regime banned symbols, books, and political party symbols, and also movies, because they were deemed offensive. Then what's the point of even having a freedom of speech protection in the Constitution if it's just overridden by offense? Then you might as well take freedom of speech out from the Constitution, because like I said earlier in the interview, freedom of speech, the debate surrounding freedom of speech and protecting freedom of speech is inherently controversial. If you're going to shy away from protecting freedom of speech because it's controversial and because you might not be as popular at the time for doing so, then you might as well abandon your aspirations of living in a country with freedom of speech, because then you will shy away from every fight for freedom of speech.
That is, of course, Ernst van Zyl from the organization Afriforum, who did, as I mentioned at the beginning, bring forth this appeal to that decision. And we'll see how that plays out. Terence, maybe as a last gasp on this issue, and I wanted to bring this up because I think Ernst is absolutely correct on this issue, especially when it comes to the effective, I'll use the expression, slippery slope that comes with the notion that pure offense of something should warrant the state imposing a ban with it. And people often forget that a ban comes with force and violence. That when the state bans something, there's a very real risk if you, flout that ban, that you'll be subject to state violence. And let me use an example here which relates. If we ban the old South African flag, as a Zulu man, I could make the argument, well, actually, maybe we should ban the flying of the Union Jack, because if anything, that flag of the UK represents colonialism, a very colonialism which a great ancestor of mine, Umehloka Zulu, literally fought against the English and their colonial structures Other great Zulu warriors even took up arms against the taxes imposed by the British. And of course, you can go down the line as to various groupings saying, because I take offense of something, it should be banned by the state. And that's a very slippery slope, is it not?
Here's the problem. The world today is probably the most sort of mixed up in terms of people migrating, different communities coming together. Your great grandparents and my great grandparents would have lived in essentially a homogeneous society. You could put up your statue or your memorial to your heroes, and it would resonate through the community. These days it's not. It's a lot more difficult. This is complicated stuff. I mean, I've seen in the comments concentration camps. We go to the Middle East and you can start asking all sorts of questions about various symbols there. The St. George's flag of England, the red cross on a white field. There have been Muslim inmates in English prisons who've complained about that because that was the flag of the Crusades. In fact, there was an admonition to Syrian children for hundreds of years after King Richard: beware, or England will come after you. That was the kind of cultural imprint. We cannot paper this over. We cannot paper these differences over by invoking some sort of right not to be offended. There are instances where it can be justified, but I think that those are very specific, contextual, and do they involve some sort of a threat of violence? I mean, there's a legal definition of hate speech, and this is why I think that the original judgment was flawed. I don't believe that even I believe as a society we could do without the gratuitous offense, and I agree fully on that score. So no, I don't think people should be displaying the old flag. But I think slippery slope, but also a recognition of the dizzying diversity. And let's not sort of reduce diversity to a postcard. Diversity can be bloody hard. Your great grandfather and mine might well have been facing each other at St. Luana. In which case, you guys got your great grandfather got the better of mine. But you see what I'm saying.
And maybe just to conclude the thought, because we've run out of time completely. In fact, we're nearly running over time. And I'll give you the final word here just in 30 seconds. For me, it's important, Terence, that, all organizations, even those that I disagree with, actually stand and stump for free speech. There are things, free speech is not here for us to talk about nice things like the weather and, oh, you see, I was late for the bus today. No, free speech encompasses having incredibly uncomfortable conversations, even ones which are incredibly offensive. I can have a conversation with someone who, if I wear the one hat of being a Zulu, someone who says, oh, colonialism was great. It's uncomfortable for me to hear someone say that, but I can have that debate, I can have that discussion because free speech allows that. On the other hand, I can have someone who says, oh, Palestine from the river to the sea, this expression that basically is calling for the extermination of Jews in Israel. I don't like them saying that. I hate the fact that they're also calling for violence, and I'll call them out on that. But that's where I'll draw the line, calling out someone inciting violence. But I'll still have a conversation with someone who says they're pro-Palestine, and we can hash it out. If I wear my other cap, literally in this case, as a Jew. So there's many facets to this, but what I don't like the idea of is giving politicians and governments the power to tell us what is and isn't acceptable speech in society. As a last gasp, the Americans are going through something like this right now, where the Joe Biden administration has set up this it's been dubbed the Ministry of Truth by its opponents, rightly, in my view. That will sit within Homeland Security and will decipher what is misinformation. This expression we hear a lot in media today. But Terence, your final word, 30 seconds, please.
Free speech is, let's say, a foundational human right. I would say free speech and the right to citizenship are the foundation on which everything else is built. We give those up, we sacrifice them, we abridge them at our extreme peril.
Try and re-establish myself back on screen here. Just give me a moment. But of course, you're absolutely right, Terence. And with that being said, we are completely out of time. As I try and get myself back into focus here, but we're completely out of time. Terence, thank you very much. Of course, Terence Corrigan from the Institute of Race Relations. Shout out to him, man, for joining us in this conversation. And thank you for joining us for the conversation tonight. Please remember, hit that like button. Do it now. It really helps get the show out and wide. I'll be very interested to hear your comments. I know this debate was raging on my page as I just threw almost like throwing a I don't know what to call it, like a grenade in the middle of a army base, like people just scatting around to try and find it and blah, blah, blah. Bad analogy. But the point is, it really did spark the cat amongst the pigeon. Better analogy. Thank you, English language. So you see, it's not all hate for the UK and the Union Jack. But let me know what you think in the comments, especially if you're watching this post this live broadcast. I very will much, that was terrible. I will be watching the comment section on all platforms that you watch this on Twitter, YouTube, or on Facebook. That being said, thank you for watching. If you want to support the Big Daddy Liberty Show, all of that information is in the descriptor of the video. People are donating 100 Rand, they're contributing 100 Rand a month, and it's going a very long way, especially as we're about to hit the road again. So guys, super appreciate it, and thank you very much. Thanks to all my guests, including those who didn't rock up. We really did want you on the show, but hey, it does happen. But as I always say at the end of every show, never trust a commie, or even someone who wants to ban free speech.